The message came in on a Tuesday. I remember because I was sitting at my kitchen table with a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal and the morning news on low, and my phone buzzed next to my coffee mug. I looked down expecting something from my buddy at church, or maybe a weather alert. It was from my son. Dad, Renee and I have been talking. We think it's better if you stop coming by the house so much. We need space. We want peace. Please respect that. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I set the phone face down on the table and looked at the window and watched a cardinal land on the feeder I'd built with my own 2 hands and bolted to the fence post the summer before. I sat there for a long time. The oatmeal went cold. The cardinal flew away. The news anchor kept talking about something I couldn't hear anymore. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years as an electrician in Akron, Ohio. I raised 2 kids in a house I bought with money I earned pulling wire through walls and crawling under trailers in July heat. My wife, Linda, passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer. She was 51. After she died, I threw myself into my son Nate's life because it was the only place that felt like home anymore. Nate, his wife Renee, and their little boy Oliver, they were what I had left. And now Nate was texting me to stay away. I want to tell you what I had done for them before I tell you what I did next. Not because I want sympathy, but because you need the full picture to understand why that text message didn't just sting. It hollowed me out. Nate and Renee got married 6 years ago. They were 26. Sweet kids, I thought. I liked Renee well enough at first. She had opinions about everything. The food, the seating chart, which side of the church her family should sit on. But I figured that was just nerves. I paid for most of the wedding because Nate asked me to, and because Linda wasn't there to walk him down anything, and I thought maybe if I gave them a good start, things would be good. Then came the house. They found a place in Fairlawn, 3-bedroom colonial, nice neighborhood. They needed help with the down payment. I gave them $22,000. I didn't lend it. I gave it. Nate hugged me in the driveway of that house and said, "Dad, I don't know what we'd do without you." Renee said thank you, and then immediately started talking to Nate about paint colors. That was fine. People process things differently. Then the furnace went in their second winter. $4,200. I paid it. Then Renee wanted to finish the basement. I didn't pay for all of that, but I did the electrical work myself, which saved them probably $8,000 in labor. I spent 3 weekends crawling around down there. Nate brought me a beer once. Renee was out with her friends. Oliver was born 4 years ago. Best day I'd had since Linda died. I was in that waiting room for 11 hours. When Nate came out and said it was a boy, I cried in a way I hadn't cried since the funeral. I held that baby, and I made him a promise the way you do when it's just you and a newborn and nobody's watching. I promised him I'd be there. I'd be the grandfather who showed up. And I did show up. Every week. Sometimes twice. I picked Oliver up from daycare when Renee had her yoga class or her lunch with friends or whatever it was that week. I took him to the park. I taught him how to feed the ducks at the reservoir. I fixed things around their house while he napped. I was not a burden. I was, as far as I understood it, a resource. But somewhere in that second year, things shifted with Renee. Little things first. She'd leave the room when I got there. She'd answer my questions with one word. Once I brought Oliver a toy, a wooden train set, nothing fancy, and she said in front of Nate, "We're trying not to clutter the house with more stuff, Dennis." That was my name coming out of her mouth like a period at the end of a sentence. I talked to Nate about it once, gently. I said, "Is everything okay? I feel like I'm walking on eggshells sometimes." He said Renee had been stressed. He said she was working on some things. He said to give her time. I gave her time. Then they needed a new car. Renee's Civic had high mileage, and they'd been sharing Nate's truck. I co-signed on a loan for a Honda CR-V, not because they asked with warmth. Nate texted me, "Dad, any chance you could co-sign? Our credit score isn't great right now." I drove to the dealership. I sat in that little office under fluorescent lights and signed my name on a document that made me legally responsible for a car I would never sit in. That was 11 months ago. Then on a Tuesday in March, I got that text. "We need space. We want peace." I sat with it for 2 days before I called Nate. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail, calm, just asking if we could talk. He texted back, "Dad, I'm not trying to make this a big thing. Just need some breathing room. We'll reach out when we're ready." Renee had clearly written that, or at least coached it. Nate doesn't say breathing room. I didn't call again. What I did instead And this is the part I want you to understand. I didn't do out of anger. Not exactly. It was more like something cleared. Like when you've been holding your breath so long, you don't even realize it until you finally exhale. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time, and I thought about Linda, and I thought about the wedding check, and the furnace, and the basement, and the dealership. And I thought about Oliver's face when I brought him that wooden train. Before Renee had said anything, the way he picked up the engine and made a sound with his mouth, a little chug-chug, and I thought, when is the last time someone in that house said thank you and meant it? I couldn't remember. So I started making some quiet changes. The first thing I did was call my accountant. I had redone my will 2 years ago after Linda passed, and at that point I'd set things up so that Nate was the primary beneficiary of everything. The house, my savings, my pension payout, a small investment account. I told my accountant I wanted to revisit that. She didn't ask why. She just scheduled an appointment. The second thing I did was call my bank. I had a joint checking account with Nate that I'd set up when Linda was sick, in case I needed him to handle things. There wasn't a lot in it, maybe $3,000, but it existed. I had my name removed as the co-owner and transferred my portion to my personal account. The third thing I did was call the dealership. I explained the situation calmly. I told them I was a co-signer on the CRV and that I had reason to believe my financial relationship with the primary borrower was changing. I asked what my options were. The finance manager walked me through it. There wasn't a clean way to remove myself from the loan without Nate refinancing on his own. So I sent Nate a text, one text, no drama, that said, I need you to refinance the CRV in your own name. I'm removing myself as co-signer. You have 60 days. He didn't respond. I also stopped doing the things I had been doing quietly. No more spontaneous Venmo when I thought they might be short. I used to send Nate $200 or $300 a month, sometimes more, just money that showed up in his account without him having to ask. I told myself it was a gift. It was really a way of staying close. I stopped sending it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't call my sister in Columbus to vent. I didn't post anything. I didn't talk to Nate's old friends. I went to church on Sunday, had coffee with a guy from my old crew on Wednesday, took Oliver's photo off my lock screen because looking at it hurt too much, and I lived my life. The thing about removing yourself from someone's finances is that it doesn't make noise right away. It's like turning off a faucet in another room. They don't hear it. They just notice eventually that things are drying up. It took about 6 weeks. The first sign was a text from Nate in early May. Not warm, not hey dad, how are just hey, did you stop the Venmo thing? My account's been off. I wrote back, yes. Thought it made sense given the space you needed. He didn't respond. The second sign was a call from the dealership. Not to me, but apparently they'd reached out to Nate about the refinancing timeline. Nate texted me again. Dad, the dealership is on me about the car. Can we talk about that? I said. 60 days, Nate. That was my text. A week after that, Nate's truck broke down. I know this because Oliver's daycare called me. I was still listed as an emergency contact to say that no one had picked him up, and they'd been trying to reach Nate and Renee. I drove over and got Oliver. He was sitting in a little plastic chair with his backpack on, looking at the door. When he saw me, he slid off the chair and walked over and put his hand in mine and didn't say anything. He was 3. He just walked with me to the car. I took him to my house and fed him macaroni and cheese, and we watched a nature show about sea otters. He fell asleep on my couch under the blanket I keep on the arm for when it gets cold. I sat in the armchair and watched him sleep, and I let myself feel all of it at once, the missing and the anger and the grief and the love, because there was nobody watching and I could. Nate showed up at 8:30 to get him. He stood in my doorway and looked at Oliver asleep on the couch, and something moved across his face. He started to say something, then he stopped. Thanks, Dad, he said. That was all. He was fine, I said. He ate. He's good. Nate nodded and picked Oliver up without waking him, which is a skill you learn when they're small, how to move them without breaking the spell. He got to the door and then he turned around. I don't know what's going on with Renee, he said. I don't know how to explain it. I looked at my son. He was 32 years old and he looked tired in a way I recognized, because I had been tired, that same way when things with Linda were hard, when you're living inside something you can't name yet. I know, I said. Get him home to bed. He left. I turned off the porch light and stood in the kitchen for a while. Then I washed Oliver's bowl and put it in the drying rack and went to bed. 3 weeks later, Renee's sister called me. I was surprised. I hadn't talked to her in over a year. She said she was calling because she was worried. She said things were strained at Nate and Renee's house. She said Renee was stressed about money and that Nate had been working a lot of overtime. She didn't say it outright, but I understood she was calling to see if I could help. I listened. I thanked her for calling. I told her I hoped things settled down for them. I didn't offer anything. She didn't push. What Renee's sister didn't know, and what I had only recently fully understood myself, was that the money had been the ballast. Remove it, and the boat lists. The overtime Nate was working, the stress. Those weren't new problems. Those were always there, underneath. I had been subsidizing a version of their life they couldn't actually afford. When I stepped back, the true weight of things became visible. I'm not proud of saying that, but it's true. May turned to June. I planted tomatoes in the backyard like I do every year. I had dinner with my buddy from church and his wife, and they asked about Nate, and I said he was good because I didn't know what else to say, and I wasn't ready to make it a story yet. I started taking evening walks again, something I'd stopped doing when Linda died because it felt too lonely. It still felt lonely, but a different kind. On a Saturday in the middle of June, I was on the back porch with coffee when I heard a car in the driveway. I walked around the side of the house, and Nate was there. Alone. He was standing by his truck, the truck he'd gotten repaired, apparently, and he had his hands in his pockets, and he was looking at the tomatoes through the fence. I said, "Hey." He said, "Hey, Dad." We stood there a moment. A neighbor's lawnmower started up somewhere down the street. "I should have called first," he said. "It's fine," I said. "You want coffee?" We sat at the porch table, and he wrapped his hands around the mug, and he looked older to me than he had at Christmas. He was quiet for a while. I didn't push. I've learned that with Nate, the same way I learned it with Linda. If you wait long enough and you don't fill the silence, he'll fill it himself. "She wants to move," he said finally. "Renee. She wants to go to Charlotte. Her sister's down there, and she's been wanting to go for a long time." He paused. "I think she blames me for how things are, and maybe some of that is me. I don't know. I didn't say anything. I've been thinking about what I said. What I texted you." He looked up. "I should have called you. Not texted. I should have called and talked to you like a man. That hit me somewhere I wasn't expecting." "Yeah," I said. "You should have. I'm sorry, Dad." I looked at my son who used to bring me drawings from school and ask me to explain how electricity worked, and cried when we put the dog down, and stood next to me at his mother's grave and shook so hard I thought he'd break. And I knew the apology was real. I knew it was also only the beginning of things. But real is real. You start there. "I accept that," I said. "I do." He nodded. He drank his coffee. I didn't tell him what I'd changed in the will. That conversation could come later, or it could not come. I didn't tell him about the bank account. What I did say was this: "I love you. That doesn't go anywhere. But I can't keep being the floor you stand on if you're not going to look down and notice I'm there. You understand what I mean?" He said he did. "And Renee needs to hear that from you," I said. "Not from me. That's your job. I'm not her enemy, and I don't think she's mine. But something has to change in how your household thinks about what I am to you. I'm your father, not a resource." He was quiet. Then he said, "Oliver asks about you. Every time I pick him up from somewhere, he asks if we're going to Pop's house." Something in my chest pulled tight. "Tell him he can call me," I said. "Anytime." Nate left around noon. I walked him to his truck, and he hugged me the way he used to when he was a teenager and embarrassed about it. One arm, quick. But then he didn't let go, and after a second the other arm came up, and it was a real hug, the kind you can't fake. I held on to my son in my driveway in the June heat, and I didn't say anything, and neither did he. That evening I made dinner for one, same as most evenings. Pork chop, green beans, a piece of bread. I ate at the table instead of in front of the TV, which I'd started doing again lately. The window was open, and I could smell the tomatoes, that green sharp smell they get when the vines are warm. I thought about Linda. I thought about how she used to say, "Dennis, you love too hard and ask too little." I thought she might have been right. I thought maybe asking a little more, in the right way, at the right time, wasn't the same as asking for too much. I thought about Oliver, saying chug chug with the wooden train, and the way his hand felt in mine outside the daycare, small and trusting. I am 63 years old. I have more road behind me than ahead of me, and I know it. I don't need much. I need to sit on my own porch in the morning. I need my tomatoes to come in. I need my son to know I exist not as a safety net or a subsidy or a background resource, but as a man who loved his mother and built things with his hands and is still here, still standing, still worth the courtesy of a phone call. And I need my grandson to know where to find me. The phone rang that night just after 8. I didn't recognize the number at first. Then I realized it was the landline in the kids' playroom, the one Nate had kept from when they first moved in, before everyone went fully cellular. Oliver had figured out how to dial on it once before, and Renee had called me mortified, apologizing. I picked up. "Pop?" said a small voice. "Hey, bud," I said. "Yeah. It's me. I'm right here."